Do you have a tough challenge with your supply chain or logistics? Loguru is the intelligent partner that works globally with manufacturers, retailers, and logistics businesses. We help our customers define, buy, and safely implement solutions across the supply chain. If you want a more sustainable future for your supply chain, visit loguru.co.uk. Complete end-to-end satisfaction guaranteed.
Coming up in this episode.
So I rocked in Bradford for 9 o'clock at 1 minute to midday. Who was there meeting me at the door was Ken Morrison. And he said, look, son, I hear you're from Yorkshire. He said, look, I've got you lunch in the canteen, fish and chips do, and it's on me. And he said, but before you go in, you need to wipe the blood off the top of your head where I'd been spun round in the car. And he said, you've told me enough, you've got the contract. That was it.
The Logistics Collective podcast is a series focused on the logistics industry, where there are many incredible stories to be told. We'll be speaking with those who've worked and are working within the industry today. What have been their experiences, good and bad, since joining, and would they recommend a career in the industry to others? Here's your host, Malcolm Pope.
Hello, and welcome to another Logistics Collective podcast. And this is in our brief series with Mark Tailford. We covered in the first episode really his stalled career path with the RAF, which perhaps would have been from rear gunner to air vice marshal. He didn't head in that direction, instead of which he landed as a partner with the John Lewis and Waitrose partnership. And we talked really a little bit about his experience of really becoming somebody that was fully invested as far as retailers concerned and all of the key elements of that fantastic discipline. And then we ended on the cliffhanger of him basically, as a result of Waitrose's then desire not to embrace barcode, the cliffhanger was, well, would he have a career? Where would he go on? And maybe he should start his own business. And it's from that point I want to reintroduce Mark and say welcome again and say, come on, what happened next? You've left us on a cliffhanger. We've been wanting to know what's been going on.
Thank you, Malcolm. It's a pleasure to continue the story. So I think if I look back now, I've been exposed to so many international minds and skills and people. You know, I remember I was fortunate to represent England at under 17 level at soccer, and we played against a German team. And I'm one of the few people that can say they've beaten a German team. But I marveled at the way they played, even though we were victorious that day. And so, you know, I went away from that game, not with the usual feelings of like, we won, like, okay, I think I learned something here. And then seeing my father's business taken on by Taito, a Japanese company, and his dream being to see this game played all over the world, and they did it. So I think I had this feeling that as an island, even though I'm very proud to be British, actually we didn't do some of the other scaling things as well. So I started my first business. I mean, I was very fortunate that John Lewis were my first customer, but was really surprised that when I brought these international barcode readers together from Holland, from Japan and places, no one had ever seen this type of thing. And of course, it had my own personal tweaks on those as well. So I think I was just well aware that there was a much bigger world outside of our island, and I wanted to see it. I wanted to experience it. And that led me eventually, you know, by this time we'd got a £6.5 million barcode distribution business that really looked after its customers. And everything was always about making our products right for those clients and their partners. So always working in collaboration with an integrator.
So this would have been all about barcode readers, barcode scanners, all of that, and the interfacing into, I guess, well, the ERPs or sales systems of that time.
Exactly. So he's not only scanning at point of sale, which was growing remarkably, but the advent of mobility. So the first one-handed mobile readers in the world were coming, and people were now able to take inventory rather than just using a piece of paper and their eyes. So that was terrific. So you'd think I would be happy, you know, that we had all these wonderful partnerships and clients.
Before you go and move swiftly on,
yes.
I'm going to ask for a redirection.
Okay.
So look, it's no small beer building a 6.5 million turnover business. And it's no small beer for doing that. When you're dealing with new tech and you're upscaling and you're dealing with some of the largest businesses going. Because even if you work for a large business, it's a heap worth a difference being a smaller business selling into some of these behemoths that are there. They've all got interesting challenges. Payment's interesting. I've been lucky thus far, but it's not without nagging. But the keynote within that is, okay, you had John Lewis as your foundation client, and lucky you, and they must have really respected and appreciated you to give you that level of support and interest. And I'm going to ask a supplementary, because when did barcodes get into Waitrose? But did you move far away from John Lewis? I mean, how did you add to in terms of that?
Well, what I really felt was because of this customer experience passion that John Lewis had and I shared, I felt that there was still this big disconnect between everything that was technology coming into the world and the way that it would be implemented and how we would help the staff to be able to use and get the best access to the data and everything. So there was a huge chasm there that no one was filling. So I thought if we can just make those bits much easier, we don't overcomplicate it, which was a tendency from, it's really funny when I look back. It seemed that every year that ends in a 2, something quite miraculous has happened. Decisions. I just remember decisions. My first business was started in 92. And so for me, I could see a great opportunity to help businesses get control, because if you can get control of your inventory, you're more than halfway there. And to take the opportunity of these great inventors and big organizations who could bring great technology to the market. However, even though, we didn't, I met my first business partners, incredible man, John James, and really knowledgeable, great mathematician. And we were both shocked when we got hit with a £30,000 debt from a PLC, would you believe, in our first 6 months of trading. But it was almost like a blip. So that was our money. I mean, we didn't borrow any money to get this business started. We just learned from it, and we dusted ourselves down really quickly and made sure that it never happened again. And it never did. It's really funny. But we were able to grow. But then I saw, as we're coming towards the millennium, this, big thing about year 2K and would planes be falling out of the sky because as the clock turned over at midnight and everything. And I felt that there was this almost like a get rich quick scheme from these big manufacturers to make people use Windows before they were ready in a mobile device. Why would you want Windows on a mobile device if the people are too frightened to hold the thing and ready to push the next button? So I came up with my own innovation, got help from the University of Buckingham to build my first mobile handheld that used thin client technology. I'd seen it in industry, all these VDUs on factory floors, all displaying the information in real time. And I thought, why couldn't we do that on a mobile? So I went to my friends that made things and they didn't get it. And it's like a failing of mine that I couldn't convince some of my partners at the time, like Denso and others, to embrace what I felt was very sensible. And so by chance, I happened to bump into a company that had been around for, over 12 years, but never had made anything in Finland. And the CEO of that business had been itching to make his own product. And I showed him what I kind of built and designed. We were testing a unit with a couple of retailers. And he didn't understand why, and he thought I was being a bit of a Luddite in going back at stepping technology, but he built it for me within 6 weeks. And this started off a whole new adventure, and that product became the most successful mobile product from about end of the 90s to about 2010. So I think famously, there were 17 projects in a row that we won with British retailers. The town that I live in, Stratford-upon-Avon, the main street, Bridge Street, we literally had every shop using our product. And people said this was impossible. So there was a great team effort. Again, It's surprising for me that a small country like Finland would embrace my idea, but not surprising on the backdrop of Nokia, because that's where they'd come from. So it was a collision course and a really exciting period. And this should be used as a blueprint for other people, that when people tell you that it's not possible and people won't buy it, have trust in your own judgment if you know why you're doing it.
So which, if you can say, which retail brands did you get into?
Morrisons, Spar, WH Smith, Halfords, Woolworths, Costcutter, Londis, Nicer Today, Edinburgh Woolamills, The Range, Co-op, McCall's, the list goes on. And this was a brilliant collaboration. Yes, I had the idea, but it's nothing without the collaboration of all the partners who could have just stayed with the same old way. They were under pressure as well to stay with these bigger brands. But and in Finland itself, we were successful as well, which was good. The failing of the business was, and it's really interesting, the founder of that business said to me, actually, when we founded the company, he said, Mark, I know we're going to have a tremendous run at this. And he said, I know you've got my back and I've got yours, but the problems will come when we're making so much money that the banks come in. And I've got nothing against banks, but he was right. And that was a brilliant journey. You know, sometimes the ending isn't half as what you predicted it to be. But I guess as well, from my point of view, I had the courage to want to invest again. And that was another thing that happened, you know, and again, it's got a 2 at the end of it, in 2012, where I took on a challenge to provide item level ID, what we're all calling RFID now. I'd done some early work, thanks to good friends of mine at Avery at Marks and Spencer, and had seen the difference. I could walk into an RFID store and you knew it was an RFID store. You know, suddenly there weren't boxes all over the floor. Everything was organized, full shelves and everything. It was a big transformation. And I suddenly got surrounded by all these people that, again, it's a get-rich-quick scheme. Everyone wants to sell their chips, their labels, their software, their hardware and everything else. And I'm still the chap in the room that says, why are we doing this? And what's the customer service play? So we rolled out the first retailer globally to have RFID, where they'd stalled and stuttered. And this is a great story. The company was called American Apparel. The CEO was a gentleman called Dove Charney, I think. And he could walk into a store and he could look and see whether his assortment was on. He was a genius type of retailer that could see that. And that's why he wanted RFID. So it was only natural that we would then end up being his supplier, even though they're in LA and, you know, doing all the tests in London. But it was only natural that combination worked when others had failed. And they had failed badly, because he wanted the best standards and my team would give him the best standards. So now suddenly we were hearing numbers like, 24% increase in sales, a reduction in shrink and everything else. And then I spent those next 10 years evangelizing about the use of this technology. And I've started projects, you know, with John Lewis. As I said, I was heavily involved with Marks and Spencer's and Inditex, Matalan next, and many other Tesco, many other stores that we've rolled out now globally. Back in the day, the tags were, I don't know, £10, probably even more expensive than that. And it was seen as a prohibitor in this. Now you're talking 5 euro cents for the big rollouts. And suddenly UHF is the standard that everyone is using. So that's been an incredible period. And again, the collaboration that's been involved is really good. The one thing that I was partly guilty of was that everyone saw that if we could get tagged at source, supply chain, we could track items all the way through, suddenly it was like a retail perfect moment, you know? And, but actually, no one had gone over to the factories in the Far East or Mexico for the American market to actually explain the benefits. Some retailers famously made announcements to say that if you want to be a supplier to us still, you will put RFID tags on. And when I heard that, I was like, it made me come out in a shiver, because I thought that back to my John Lewis days, we would never do that. We're collaborative, we work together, and my team in John Lewis would have gone to explain to the manufacturers what the benefit for them was, but no one did that. So we saw a period until COVID, really, where everyone was still, not quite as convinced. And I've always held the belief that whilst it was really important that we helped retailers get control of their brand, I've got some great stories on that. I always felt that, food and medicines should be the point that we should focus on.
And I think what we're going to do, I think we're going to have a future-facing next episode. And this is my earlier point about sending supply chains to the optometrist or the optician.
Yeah.
And really asking the question, how much visibility do we have? How much should we have? How much do we really need? And I think the points that you've raised there are absolutely spot on. And we were put together by a certain Grant Townshend.
Yes.
And who is, I don't know, I describe him as a wonderful marketeer. I mean, I've known Grant for, getting on for 20 blah, blah, blah years. Really interesting. I sort of began to talk to Grant more, I guess, during the pandemic period when we were looking a lot at virtual reality and all of the wonders that are going on really within that. I think, in all honesty, a little bit removed from... I think logistics and supply chain, we profess it to be somehow technologically advanced and future thinking. I disagree. I think it's quite retrograde. I think it is quite stuck in the past. I think there isn't sufficient innovation within there, and there's a lot more needs to come.
Yeah, I understand that, because, I go back to my first views of the supply chain influence on John Lewis and Waitrose, when I first joined in 83, and they were the innovators. And yet, because they have, everything is going through them to get to the market, to therefore change now after they built this monolith of an industry, it's so hard for them. And, the old adage, it's not broke, don't fix it. Well, the reality is, the needs at the end is so different than what the supply chain is providing. That's why Grant, I've known Grant similar length of time, and he is this entrepreneur. It's brilliant that Grant has got together with Jerry Smith as well on the gas commercial, because they're innovating in everywhere. And what they're doing is dropping in people that they like, and they're putting us together. So, that recommendation from Grant, I couldn't wait to meet you when he told me all that you'd done, because we both have been in the trenches. We've faced those Monday mornings. By the way, in retail now, it's not Monday morning panic anymore. It's the whole of Monday. I mean, that's how extreme this has got, because there's things that are happening while, the head office is recuperating at the weekend. That means that Mondays, I don't book appointments with retailers on Mondays anymore, because I know what happens. I think as well, if we look at where we're at now, if you could get 60, 70% stock accuracy with a barcode system, you were doing well.
And that, for me, is utterly phenomenal, the in-store stock accuracy. I mean, that is something, if you haven't been involved in manufacturing logistics, that if you had within your distribution centres a stock accuracy of that level, you were dead. Yeah, that would have been national news. It'd fallen over. You had empty spots in the store. That would have been, you needed to be in the high 99s in terms of your accuracy to be able to have some chance of actually delivering the expectation of our customers.
Yeah.
And so that for me, when you related that to me, that was the oh my God moment, really, because we were coming at it from a slightly different direction when we're thinking about our ample principle, whereby, and we'll come to this in our future view, which is all of this information, it is supposed to trickle down, and it doesn't. As soon as it gets into your house, you're clueless in terms of, so all of this wonderful investment of information that's going through the supply chain, and actually when it comes into a domestic environment, nada.
Yeah.
Or not much.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And there's almost a case in point in new opportunities that perhaps can come out of that. But maybe what I wanted to do with you is, now, you're not a name dropper, you're not, but you have met a hell of a lot of interesting people and a lot of senior people within retail. And I've had the pleasure of having dinner with you, and I've heard all of the mad stories about your growing up, and various things that happened with cars, and various things that happened with having a few too many to drink. And if you get a chance to go and have an evening out with Mark, please do. Your slides will be splitting most of the evening. But in addition to all of that, you've met some really retail industry heroes, haven't you?
I have. I've been really fortunate. The ones, when you mentioned this, John Hargreaves at Matalan springs to mind. I wet behind the ears, just started my first business, and I'd done some work at his previous retail business, which was corner shops in Ilford, I remember. And I remember the name of the company. It was named after his daughter and son, I think, anyway. And so I'd shown some agility. So 6 months into setting up our first business, I get a call to say, he'd like to meet you in Bamber Bridge, I think it's near Preston, at 8:00. And I thought, wow, that's early, coming from, I was living in Buckinghamshire then. So I just made a call into his office to say, look, it is quite early. He said, no, 8:00 in the evening, and it's the middle of winter. So I'm going up in the evening. I asked my business partner, John, do you want to come and join me? And he said, no, you're on your own.
No, this wasn't in the Triumph Spitfire, was it?
No, no. He said, no. You're on your own. So my father always taught me to be early, which doesn't always happen. But so I'm now there, and it's sleet and hail. There's no sat-nav in those days. I'm in a disused car parking space with a burnt down warehouse in the dark, waiting for someone to turn up. And sure enough, 1 minute to 8.
It does sound like like one of the 1960s movies with Michael Caine in it, that you're sort of going to have like a secret assignment. I mean, I think there's a bit of MI6 coming out here, I really do.
Well, I did have a think what have I got in the boot, just in case I need something to protect myself. And there was my Newbury cricket bat that was in there. But on the basis that I hadn't had a particularly good season in the summer, I wasn't so sure that it would come into being handy at protecting myself. But literally at 1 minute to 8, there was a fleet of cars come round and circle me in the car park. And, this moment, I am thinking, what have I done? And a whole load of people get out. They'd all met at their head office, which I always think was down the road in Preston in those times. And we proceeded with torches. Everyone else had got a torch. I hadn't. But we go into this disused warehouse, rats running around, no electricity. And his opening line was, there was a number of industry people there. I didn't recognize anyone. I couldn't see anyone. It was dark. And he said, I'd like you to turn this into the best superstore you can imagine, whatever you can dream up. And of course, the fact that, my fear has just been replaced with just huge optimism, because I'm in, aren't I? And I've already imagined, fitting rooms of the future, and he's told me a little bit about the business. It was VAT exempt. And I'm thinking, okay, so your message, I always remember that at the end of the store, it said, you've just saved X percent, it was 20% or 18%, whatever it was in those days. And I'm thinking, right, okay, on that basis, people might spend more. So I want supermarket style checkouts. And I'd worked with one of my Dutch partners on a fixed scanner that could scan so brilliantly that we could now start to see, real buzz in this place. By the way, one of my peers, I think he was an expert in printers or something, chuckled when Mr. Hargreaves said this, and he was asked to leave the room. We never saw him again in the whole rollout. But so I was lucky to be a part of that incredible, what a retailer, this great agility and eyesight that he had for what would be the future. And I've luckily kept in contact with them all these years. Another one would be probably my time with Morrisons. And of course, my family are from Yorkshire originally, and getting the chance to work with Morrisons was just brilliant. But we were starting to make new products. And, when you're making new products, it's not easy. You need the trust of the retailer that you will carry out what you say. And I was lucky to work with a gentleman called Peter Kroll, who had been with Ken for 30 years, I think. So he was a great judge on the type of business, the type of characters that would work with Ken, and he trusted me and my team, and sure enough, we were able to win his confidence, and thousands of terminals, and this is the old Hill Law House, which was our head office.
I think I can give you an overlay on that, because I remember my time working for Heinz back then, and in the early noughties. The impression of Morrisons was, shall we say, a little old-fashioned.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
There wasn't really a full embrace of the modern world coming out of it. Fine business, still remains a fine business. But I think it was... they weren't at the leading edge, I would probably say, in that time.
You're so right. And, some of my team even questioned me when we were trying to break down this, we've always done it this way sort of approach. But I could see that they had a great retail proposition with their customers. The customers enjoy, so why couldn't we work on it? And I remember the day, it was a really crucial day with the Morrisons project. And, bear in mind, I've got a new product. So I've got an engineer's flown in from Finland, and I picked him up from a hotel in Stratford-upon-Avon at 4:00 in the morning. And we'd had the biggest whiteout for years. So, and there I am. I'm now in a Jaguar XK, whatever it is. Yeah. X, I think it's called. I don't know what it was. Anyway, XJ, the sporty car. Yeah. Soft top. And when I arrived to pick him up, to pick up these, we had to deliver this product so it would be tested. He took one look at the car and wanted to go back to his bedroom, I think. He just thought I was crazy. And I said, look, don't worry. The roads are gritted. Well, that was true for Warwickshire, but it wasn't true for Leicestershire. And then a Ford, I don't know what, Fiesta came past me on, the outside lane on the and whatever it was going up to the M1 was totally, no one had been on it for hours. And she took me off the road. My car was, destroyed. And eventually, after she drove off in her car, and the police very kindly, I said I needed to be in Bradford for 9. Well, that clearly wasn't going to happen. So they took me to a Jaguar dealership and got me in a Fiat Punto, and we carried on the journey. So I rocked in Bradford for 9 o'clock at 1 minute to midday. Who was there meeting me at the door was Ken Morrison. And he said, look, son, I hear you're from Yorkshire. I don't sound like a Yorkshireman, but he'd obviously, someone had been batting for me in Morrisons. I know who that was, Peter. And he said, look, I've got you lunch in the canteen, fish and chips do, and it's on me. Now, and he said, but before you go in, you need to wipe the blood off your foot, off the top of your head where I'd been spun round in the car. And he said, you've told me enough. You've got the contract. That was it. So we didn't pitch. They didn't look at the product, the fact that we never gave up. And that would be a story for me. Lots of people say, why do you keep trying? And why do you keep trying to transform and innovate? And that's the only option, because it's a famous phrase, isn't it? You only lose if you give up. I trust people. I'd love to work with people. So to get that opportunity, I would want another, without being a big name dropper now, you said I wasn't, but the time that I've spent with Inditex in Coruña in northern Spain, again, that thing about learning from international people as well, the bigger picture, and also Nordstrom in Seattle. The way that they operated, very different than a British company. Not one's right and one's wrong, but they fully embraced RFID. They fully, they in Inditex and Decathlon in France as well, they went and got it right at nuts and bolts level so that they could implement through the supply chain and into the stores. Whereas in my early foray into RFID, I just wanted to prove to retailers that we could do a good job in the store. And that would pay for everything else, which it did. But there's a better way of doing things. I guess what I'm saying, Malcolm, is you can never quite predict the route that you go. But eventually, if you have that process that together you're not going to fail, that you'll get the results for the retailer in the end.
Now, I hope the listener is perhaps focused on the number of names that have been dropped, because they're important. I have the great pleasure of talking to some fascinating and interesting people, not just through Logistics Collective, but through our work with Laguru. But Mark really is something that is fundamentally different and special. And like all people that are fundamentally different and special, they don't perhaps recognise it themselves. The keynote really here is that you've got this ball of energy. There's incredible amount of stories, but most of all, it's about the humanity and the determination to make things happen. And actually, nice guys do win. And I think this, for me, it's a good stop to take a pause, because I think we've done the Ghosts of Retail Past, and we've just in our first episode, and we've sort of covered the Ghosts of Retail recent, present, and maybe a little bit in the past. And I think where we want to take the next episode is to think about future, and perhaps starting with a view of what are our limitations, what are our self-imposed limitations at this stage, and what do those limitations actually mean? What are we missing as a result of those limitations? Because I'm always fascinated. I mean, the piece that's come out of this that really did resonate with me is it's this investment in infrastructure. And it is our unwillingness to reinvest. And if our predecessors would have had the same view, we still would have been, making trips between our towns on coach and horses. Our coach and inns would be focused on stabling and lots of straw and hay. We would have never moved away from steam trains. I mean, some folks, would like us to move back, but we need to make a forward progression in all of this. And actually, what we've had thus far has served us okay, but there are new demands and new ideas. And I think the real question is, my reflection all the time is, are we forward thinking enough? And I really wonder. So with that, I'm drawing the episode to a close and say thank you very much again to Mark. And you can obviously please follow us on the normal podcast channels such as Spotify, Apple, Google, and others. We do broadcast onto YouTube as well. And also, if you want to have a more interactive experience, please have a look at logisticscollective.com. So thanks again to Mark, and we'll speak to him again soon.
You can get in contact by email, podcast@logisticscollective.com, or leave a voice message on our website, logisticscollective.com. The podcast is a production by Laguru.